Right guys, we're going to do a quick video about a bit of science about force feedback. It's common, well, miscommunication, I don't know, but everyone recommends that people new to sim racing run their wheelbases at 100% force feedback from the wheelbase, from the driver, no matter what strength wheel you have, right? So I thought, let's put that to the test. Usually I run LMU at about 55 or 60% from the game, and then about 49 to 50 odd percent from the Fanatec driver. And what I've done then, I'm going to do this test, right? So in my Fanatec driver, I'm going to up this to 100% on the Fanatec side for this particular test. And for the for this as well, I'm going to change this. I'm going to disable the intelligent telemetry, and I'm going to put the motor information on the wheelbase. Basically, there's a little LCD display here where I can see the actual newton meters of torque being output to the wheelbase at any one time. Now, what I do, I mean, yeah, all good. So what I do is I usually aim for about 12 to 13 newton meters of peak torque, in and around that peak torque, right? I don't want to feel too much more than that, because then everything below becomes kind of overwhelming, like, you know, and the car ends up driving me as opposed to me driving the car. So what I can tell you before we go into this, right, I've tried this in the past with other sims, and when, again, just what I find, right, when we lower the FFB on the game side to this amount, think of it like a sound signal, like, you know, music or something, where the sound is so low, and then we're cranking up the speakers massively, which is the wheelbase, to give us some kind of feel that we wouldn't otherwise have. So that's what it feels like normally to me. Now for the car setup, let's have a look. What are we going to do? So I have a HIMO default set on the car. For fuel, just to keep things consistent, we'll take 30 litres of fuel for the test. I don't know. Let's just go with that. And let's start driving. So I'm going to log this as well, and we're going to have a look at this data in MoTeC after the run to kind of see how the output torque to the car coincides with the output torque or the force feedback strength going to the steering wheel. And what you want to do is kind of have them similar. So my initial feedback on these sort of tests is really that when you max the driver, you're maximizing a low signal, so it just feels very damped. Let's see though. Let's do an out lap, then a kind of hot lap, and let's look at the force feedback numbers. So through Radeon on cold tires, we had a peak of 10.7 newton meters. So let's start from there. Now again, we're not aiming at big lap times here or anything like that. This is purely just a reasonably comfortable lap, just to get a feel for force feedback on, you know, tires that are cold and then tires that are kind of a lap of heat into them. So, you know, again, it's not about lap time or which is faster. This is purely about which feels the best, and in terms of the output, what looks best on the graphs. And we'll see that as the test goes on. So into P on cold tires, so I'm just going to slow it down to let the front actually grip, so we get the force feedback through the wheel. And here we're holding a peak of 9.5 newton meters. Then into Piff Paff, just let the front grip up. Bit of understeer. And we had 6 newton meters there. Okay, and 8.3 newton meters through that section. So already we can see that the average is around, you know, anywhere from 7 to 9.5 newton meters. Blanchiment here was 12.9. As you might expect, like a high downforce corner, so it's going to be, you know, yeah. Okay, let's do a hotter lap now. Again, I'm not going to push it, but just like what I mean by that is that the tyres will be some up to temperatures. I'm expecting a bit more grip from the car, from the tyre. And let's check the meters through Blanchimont. Or not Blanchimont, rather, Eau Rouge. Okay, so 12.9 Newton meter peak through Eau Rouge. Okay, 7 Newton meter peak there. So again, this is direct from the wheelbase, right? So we'll discuss these results now in a moment because there's more to this than meets the eye. And 7.2 Newton meter peak through No Name. P1. So 10.1 Newton meters through P1. Okay, 7.8 Newton meters through there, so you know the car feels controllable, but the FFB doesn't feel as dynamic. It feels like there's detail there, but it's not loud, if that makes sense. Like it's not talking to me as clearly as I'm used to be perfectly honest. Like I feel a lot of stuff going on, but it's not very crisp. Okay, so
log building finished.
All right, so we have a baseline to go from, right? So let's jump back to the garage and let us now. Tell you what. Let's have a look at MoTeC right now and kind of see what that looks like. So I'm just opening MoTeC on the other screen, and yeah. Alrighty, let me just load this up. Alright, top screen. So, here's MoTeC. And this is the lap we've just done, the 202.488. So, yeah, again, like we're not going for lap time here. What you're looking at is basically the steering shaft torque and the FFB output. So, let's highlight a part of it so we can maybe zoom in and actually look at what's going on here, right? So let's look over here at this section, right? So you can see the red is the steering shaft torque, and this is what appears to be coming from the game, or the steering shaft, like literally on the car itself in game. And then the blue looks to be the FFB output from the game, or going to the wheelbase essentially. Now you can see there that the steering shaft torque appears to be having larger ranges, like much more dynamic in its range, but the actual steering shaft torque isn't really aligning with the FFB output entirely, and you can see that particularly here. So I feel like there's information that I'm missing. Like, so what I mean by that is the signal from the game, the blue line, is not as in line with the overall torque, and the reason is because you know we've had to dial down the FFB in the game a lot because we're running the wheelbase at 100%. So let's have a look in the middle, this section here. Like you can see that the red line is much more dynamic, but yet the blue line is relatively flat in the overall grand scheme of things, and that's just down to what I feel is essentially what we're doing is like we're choking the game downward in terms of the FFB that we're allowing it to produce. And the reason we're doing that is because, well, if we run that at normal levels, we'll fucking rip our hands off because the wheelbase is cranked up to 100%, which, that's kind of injury territory. So what we'll do now is, and let's just have a look at the lap overall. We'll notice actually just before we go any further, like if we look at Eau Rouge Radeon, there's no clipping at all. The maximum FFB the game tries to give us is the top of this blue line here, which looks to be what, 57% of the overall FFB output the game wants to give us, or thereabouts. So that's kind of what we're working with, give or take. So no clipping, but like I say, a bit of detail in the middle appears to be missing. So what I'm going to do then for the next test is, let me just jump back into the game, right? So we're going to keep the setup the same on the car. Nothing else is going to change. The only difference from a control perspective is I'm going to bring this up to, let's say 55%. Okay, and then in Fanalab, so let's bring up Fanalab. I'm going to change the FFB strength in the wheelbase to also 55%. So dead in the middle, pretty much of both. Why will that not come down? Let me just try that again. 83, 75, 63, 60, 55, down, and one more. There we go. So 55 in the Fanatec driver, 55 in game. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, oh, well, Gary, look, 55% on the driver is only given a max output of 13.8 Newton meters of torque. And then when you put that against the 55% in the game, it makes out that we're only going to get like half of that again, let's say, right? So, you know, what, 7-8 Newton meters of torque maximum. But that's not entirely accurate, because remember, we're telling the game now to give us, you know, essentially like almost double the output from 27 up to 55%. So we're taking that big jump. And then, while it's true we're bringing down the driver, you'll see it's actually going to meet in the middle somewhere. So I'm expecting this to give us peaks of around 12 to maybe 14 Newton meters, similar to what we've just experienced. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and have a look at it. So the usual stuff. Let's log the laps. We'll do the same thing, an out lap followed by a hot-ish lap. Fuel on the car is the same, like 29 litres, just to keep things consistent. And what I'm looking for is actual field dynamicism, because I'm expecting, like I say, the game now to actually give us more range in the FFB. And then I'm just using the driver then, essentially, just to tone it down a bit. It's way more dynamic straight away. And just through Eau Rouge Radio on there, we've had a 13.2 Newton meter peak on cold tyres. So already, like, we're getting pretty much the maximum that the wheelbase wants to give us, despite turning down to 50% in the game as well. So your no name, we have 7.5 Newton meter, 7.6, and through poo on the outlap with the colder tyres. What are we looking at? Yeah, I can feel way more through the wheel, more dynamic, 10.8 Newton meters. So although the actual peaks are still the same, I can definitely feel more detail. And I'm able to react to more stuff. It's almost like I'm getting a proper signal, if that makes sense. And it's been allowed, like, breathing room at the top end. That's what it feels like, 9.2 Newton meters through that corner. Oh, I can feel it there. That is 14.5 Newton meters through Blanchimont. So the FFB overall is stronger, so I've turned down the wheelbase, turned up the game, and combined, I'm just getting a much, much wider range without any of the kind of deadness that I felt with the other way. And again, the peaks are very similar. It's just the absolute peak is being allowed to move a bit more now. I feel that ramping up. So 14.6 Newton meter peak through Blanchimont. Yeah, 7.2 peak through that section. And what I'm doing is I'm just glancing down at the DD2 wheelbase display. 7.7 max torque through that corner. And through no name, yeah, 3.5 or so, just with a bit of understeer. Right, P1. This will ramp up on the exit, I'm sure. Yeah, 10.3 Newton meters on the exit. Piff puff. 6.6. So the thing with this is, like, I'm getting all that dynamic range. I'm getting an extra bit of strength in the right areas, and it doesn't feel flat anywhere. It just feels dynamic overall. 9.2 Newton meters out of that corner. And sure, we can feel that. 13.3 Newton meters through Blanchimont. And into the final chicane then, we're going to tip the curb, and that's going to give us a 4.7 Newton meter peak and across the line. So, alright.
Log building finished.
Time to do science and see exactly the differences here, right? So, immediately I could feel more dynamic range in the FFB, no doubt about it. And despite turning the driver down and all of that, let's have a look at MoTeC, right? So this is the previous lap we've done. Let's load in the lap we've just done. There it is there. Clicky clicky. Open open. And there is the lap we've just done. The blue and the red line. Let's zoom in. So the output torque in the steering shaft now is matching pretty much the FFB output from the game. Almost exactly 1-to-1 in terms of the graph. Now I know they're on different axes, right? So one is Newton meters, the other one is percentage. I get that, but what I'm trying to do is get it to a point where I can visualize this and say, okay, there's what's happening. Get them lined up as much as possible, and then use the wheelbase driver to essentially control the overall strength. So I'm using the gain settings, the game's FFB settings, to get these lined up pretty much exactly similar to as you see here. So everything is almost identical. Compare that to the previous run where there was big gaps. So the red, essentially look at that as, okay, this is what the car's actually doing. The blue then is the FFB that the game is being allowed to output, because we've, in the previous run we capped it at, like, what was it, 27% or something. And the key thing here is, right, that the previous run at very low settings, or very, very low FFB values, you can see that the line pretty much traces 1-to-1. But as the forces ramp up, so let's look at the run up to Blanchimont and into the final hairpin and stuff. So into Blanchimont here, and you can see on the left-hand side where we are on the track. You can see that the forces really ramp up. But the actual FFB it's spiking, but it's linear. And then look, you have this big dip in the middle from the car's steering shaft torque. So big dip, and that big dip is not really reflected in the same kind of amount, if you like, in the actual FFB. Then you have a big spike back up in the steering shaft torque, and it doesn't really resonate as quickly with the actual game's FFB. Remember, we're controlling the game's FFB down to 27% because we have the driver ramped up so high. Now, this is what I'm saying. You might say, oh, this signal, Gary, but, well, yeah, that signal is flat-ish, we can agree, the blue. Okay, it's jumping up and down, but it's generally flat-ish in its direction, right? All we're doing is ramping the driver up to amplify that, which, what does that get us? Where if we look at the same corner in the adjusted FFB, you can see there's no guessing. It's tracking it one for one. It's identical. Now, two things to note. The red and the blue look different. You know, they're not exactly matched up, and the reason being is if I have a look at the properties of this, one of them is sampling at 50 hertz, and the other is sampling at 10 hertz, I believe. Yeah, so the sample rate is slightly different, but you get the idea. The main point for me is that they're tracking each other. So, second thing then we need to do, now that we've looked at that, it's almost like I could feel a more dynamic range in the FFB because it's actually giving me a signal through each corner. Like it's giving me pretty much what the car is doing, right? So that's what the wheelbase is seeing, and then I'm just controlling the overall torque with the driver. One other thing to consider, I chose 55% in the game settings. Why I've done that, and let's pop into the game settings. Oh, we're already in the settings. Right, force feedback, 55%. What I've noticed is if I go up above the 55, let's say to 60% or whatever, it can introduce clipping a little bit at certain values. This is just on my setup right now. The clipping, and look, I'm being extreme here, right? But if we take the run we've just completed, and we go to Radeon Eau Rouge, which on my map is here. So let's have a look. So I'm going to take the run I just completed. Here's Radeon Eau Rouge. Let's look at this section down the bottom, and let's zoom in completely. You can see here, look at the blue line in particular. That is on the same axis here as 100%. Okay, so what we have is we have a force feedback clip for, when did we start? Look at the time. So 18.8 seconds or 970 meters, right? So we had like literally 18.4 seconds, and the clipping finished at 18.49 seconds. So we had 400ths of a second of a clip through Radeon. Like, you will not notice that at all. The thing is, if I was to up the game's force feedback to beyond 55%, essentially what I'm doing is I'm telling the game then to start giving kind of amplify these signals even more, amplify the blue lines even more. So let's take this. So instead of this blue line being at 66% or 67%, we'd be up at like 80 or 90% or whatever. And likewise, if we'd done the same through Radeon Eau Rouge, we'd have more of this section down here hitting the 100% line, which is here, right where the mouse is, right where that cursor is. That's the 100% line. And then conversely, like with the first test we done, when I had the FFB turned right down, you can see that the blue line, so what the game wants to give us is really controlled, but controlled to the point where it's not dynamic enough to reflect the actual steering shaft torque. Now, to me, the difference was quite noticeable. That could be down to, the driver, the wheelbase I have. It is common practice, common knowledge, an old wives' tale, I don't know, that people say to run your wheelbase at 100% and then adjust the game to get into the sweet zone. I haven't really subscribed to that way of thinking, and you can see that in the results. Actually, if we look at one more thing in not Eau Rouge, in Radeon. Let's have a look at Radeon, which is this part here. So this is coming through Radeon. You can see the track map up on the top left. So come into Radeon, turn in. There's the exit, and you can see that the FFB curve is almost matching the car one for one. without clipping. But yeah, so that's my settings, guys. You know, if you want to, you know, do this yourself, I'm using the standard or Factor 2 workbook, and then in one of the tabs I've just added in a FFB output percent and steering shaft torque in Newton meters. These are standard on the workbook, so you don't need to make any like math channels or anything like that. But yeah, so for me, just to round this out, right, somewhere between 55 and 60% on the driver, or sorry, on the game, is good for me. What you do with the driver then on your wheelbase is entirely up to you. If you have a lower Newton meter wheelbase, like whether it's 7, 10, 15 Newton meters, feel free to increase the driver on the wheelbase side. That's totally fine. But it appears that the range of FFB is controlled by the actual game side, and that appears to translate into what you see in terms of the actual FFB output percent. So yeah. Anyway, that's enough science, I suppose, for today. But yeah, let me know what you think. Drive it back to back, play around with the settings, get a feel for it. You don't want to, like, you know, my opinion is you don't want to have, let's say, a steering wheel that's, you don't want to have a steering wheel that's too strong, because ultimately, you know, you're feeling all of these fine details, but you need to be able to react to them. You know, so a steering wheel input should be exactly that. It should be about feeling what the car is doing. It's like an information channel. It's not about, you know, oh, let's ramp up to fucking 20 Newton meters and have the car drive us around the track. That's not what it's about. You know, you need to be able to feel the car, control what the car is doing, and ultimately, you know, that's what good force feedback is all about. You know, so just bear that in mind. Don't go crazy either way. Like a middle ground is good. Like I said, if I set the in-game settings at 60%, I would get a little bit more clipping through Eau Rouge. But that's acceptable, right? Eau Rouge, like you're full commit. You can feel the car load up. If it clips for, you know, a millisecond here or there, like, does it make a difference? Not really. It's not going to make any difference. And bear in mind, like, we're talking about Eau Rouge here, which is like one of the most high load corners in the game, in a hypercar which has lots of downforce. So yeah, there's the data, guys, right? So, you know, decide for yourself. You know, steering shaft torque output trace to FFB trace. You can have that one, which is a mix of both, or you can have this one where I've had to crank the driver up in order to, you know, try to feel some of this that's going on. And then if I overlay the, like, in white, yeah, like, I mean, you can decide yourself, but yeah, the data is there. I personally feel that I get more information through a setting like this compared to a setting like that, because I'm relying too much on the driver and amplifying that through, you know, just cranking up the FFB on the wheelbase side. But yeah, anyway, hopefully this has shed a bit of light for people, and, you know, play around with your force feedback. Basically, the whole point of this is, like, don't necessarily believe everything you might read or be advised. Yeah. Anyway, guys, leave it there. Thanks for watching, and yeah, until the next one.